Lonely but not alone. There was a time when I wanted more. Not more in the way people usually mean it. Not more achievement, or more things, or a different life. From the outside, my life already looked full, stable, and put together, the kind of life people assume brings contentment with it. But inside, something felt quieter than it used to. I wasn't alone. I had a partner. I had connection. I had routines and shared days. And I had a sense of being known. And yet, I felt lonely in a way that didn't make sense at first. It wasn't boredom. I'm not someone who gets bored easily, either with life or with people. My mind stays occupied. My interests stay alive. And I usually find meaning in small things without needing them to be loud or dramatic. This felt different. It felt like wanting more happiness, more laughing without effort, and more smiling that came naturally instead of on cue. I wanted deeper conversations that stretched late into the night, more joking, more curiosity, and more of that feeling where someone leans in rather than simply standing beside you. I wanted to feel more alive in the shared space, not because something was missing, but because something inside me wanted to expand. At first, I didn't recognize it as loneliness. It didn't arrive all at once. It crept in slowly, almost politely, until one day it occupied more of my attention than anything else, especially during the quiet moments, the moments when I wasn't busy, and when there was nothing left to distract me from my own thoughts. That was when it became unavoidable. It wasn't a thought I could solve by trying harder or doing more. Wanting and striving usually come with a sense of control. You can work toward a goal, you can adjust effort, and you can see progress. This wasn't like that. Even though both of us were showing up, and even though effort was shared, and even though, on paper, things were balanced, the feeling persisted. It was like trying to fill something that didn't respond to effort in the usual way. The loneliness felt physical, not dramatic but present, a kind of emptiness, like a glass that isn't empty but isn't full either, the kind of feeling that sits in your chest and follows you through the day without announcing itself. From the outside, it didn't make sense. People could look at my life and say, I had everything, and in many ways, I did. But the perception of a life and the reality of living inside it are not the same thing. That gap between how things look and how they feel can be surprisingly isolating. It's easy to assume loneliness only comes from being alone, from not having anyone, or from being disconnected. But sometimes, loneliness comes from being present in a life that looks complete, while quietly feeling unfinished inside. I didn't blame my partner, and that matters to say. I trusted their intentions. I trusted that they cared, and I trusted that nothing was being withheld on purpose. I didn't believe they were failing me, or that they were responsible for fixing how I felt. I also didn't believe I was being wronged. What I did recognize, slowly, was how natural it is to want to place responsibility outside yourself when something feels lacking, to look at the person closest to you and assume they should notice, they should know, and they should fill the gap. But people aren't mind readers, and even when someone loves you deeply, they cannot always sense the quiet shifts happening inside you. I've always been comfortable with accountability, with looking at my own effort, and with owning my reactions and my responsibilities, and yet this experience showed me something new. You can be accountable, you can do things thoughtfully, and you can communicate well, and still encounter feelings that don't belong to anyone else. This loneliness wasn't asking for blame. It was asking for attention, not outward attention, but inward. What I came to understand is that people grow, sometimes together, sometimes at different speeds, and sometimes in ways that don't announce themselves until the distance is already there. That doesn't mean something is broken, and it doesn't mean anyone failed. It means inner lives change, and shared spaces don't always change at the same pace. This was a transition, not a warning, and not a crisis. Just a moment where something needed to be acknowledged instead of ignored. The balance shifted when I stopped expecting the feeling to be solved by someone else and started listening to what it was pointing toward inside me, not as a problem, but as information. I realized that wanting more happiness, more laughter, and more depth wasn't an accusation. It was a signal that something in me wanted movement, engagement, and expression. And that change had to start with me, not by demanding more and not by assigning fault, but by recognizing that no one else can fully access the inner space where those needs live. Everyone is enough, and that is important to me. The problem isn't other people falling short. The problem is often the way a thought takes hold and convinces us that its discomfort must be resolved externally. Loneliness doesn't always mean you need someone new or something different or a dramatic shift. Sometimes it means you need to listen more closely to yourself, to notice where your inner life has outgrown old patterns, and to recognize when you're waiting quietly for something to change without naming what that change actually is. Being lonely but not alone is a strange place to be. It holds tension without collapse, presence without fulfillment, and connection without ease. And learning to sit with that balance doesn't make the feeling disappear, but it does make it honest. I don't see that period as something to fix anymore. I see it as a moment where I learned that responsibility for my inner life can't be handed off, even to someone who loves me. People grow together, people grow apart, and sometimes people grow inward. Tonight, that understanding feels enough to sit with, not resolved, just recognized.